One of the senators who is on the hot seat today, Senator Blanche Lincoln of Arkansas, she was on MSNBC this morning talking about her efforts to hold on to her seat. Take a look.
The problem is I'm being totally misrepresented. The fact is the reason that I'm having all this money spent against me is because I've stood up to special interest groups. I've stood up to the D.C. unions. I've stood up to Wall Street. I've stood up to the health insurance executives. And the fact is they're mad at me.
And indeed, they are mad at her. There's no doubt about that. We're now joined by Mike Shearer. He's the White House correspondent for The Washington Post, our post-politics segment here on Top Line. Thank you for being here. And let's begin with today's primaries. Mike, what's on the line for the White House here? Do they feel they have as much skin in this Arkansas game that they felt they had with Arlen Specter in Pennsylvania, or no?
Not quite as much as Pennsylvania, right? Because let's face it, the president and his allies had specifically recruited Senator Specter to switch parties. So there was a sort of special reason for him to be interested there. On the other hand, you know, they have campaigned for her as an incumbent senator. There has been some effort on her behalf. On the other hand, I think the truth is that this is a Democratic primary, and Mr. Halter has done very well, and I think if he wins, the White House will, you'll see the White House fully behind him.
And then you've got an outsider running as well, which may be its own benefit in a year like this. I want to ask you about Nevada. All three Republican candidates who have a real shot at this thing are confirmed Tea Partiers, but one is more Tea Party-ish than the others, perhaps. And you've got this one candidate, Sharon Angle, who's endorsed getting rid of the Department of Energy, getting rid of the Department of Education, getting rid of the IRS. This is just made for a Harry Reid ad, if you think about it. Democrats have got to be pretty happy with what they've seen played out so far, no?
Absolutely. I mean, I think from the White House on down in the Democratic Party, they're just rejoicing at the idea that somebody who's made these kinds of gaffes, who's talked about bartering as a solution, who's done all of these things that as she's gone forward in the campaign, is possibly going to be his opponent. It's a good thing.
I want to turn your attention to the White House for a moment on the oil spill. These comments that the president said, he seemed, when Matt Lauer was asking him about the criticism in the press, he seemed to take particular umbrage at that, as if he somehow, I don't know if he doesn't think it's fair criticism, and then uses this tough language. Is there a growing rift between the president and the press right now because of this oil spill story, do you sense?
It's hard for me to compare because I didn't cover the Bush White House, but I do get the sense that, there is a real uncomfortableness and almost an animosity between the president and the press. That's partly explainable because the questions have gotten a lot tougher. But I also think that there's despite all of the talk of how much good press he got during the campaign, there really isn't much love there between him and us.
And Mike, I'm struck by the White House has said, look, this is not about emotion. This isn't about who can yell the loudest. And then you see an interview like this where he talks about kicking asses. And the Drudge Report has an image of him up as Superman now, like flying to the rescue. It strikes me that the White House has taken this critique to heart when you see responses like this, that they do realize they need to telegraph more anger.
Well, let's face it, it wasn't working. Gibbs was saying at the briefing, well, if it would have helped solve the spill to stand on top of the building and yell. And it wasn't working. So I think they realize that, and you've seen progressively his rhetoric get tougher.
But he says this isn't about theater, and then all he does is do something theatrical.
Well, but I mean, the truth is it's about both, right? We know that. It's about the substance of trying to get the thing plugged and clean up the oil and all of the substance, and it's also about message and making sure that people understand and feel comfortable that he's in charge. Very
quickly, our final 20 seconds here. Do you sense that it has taken the White House off course of other agenda items?
I think it can't help but do that because we're all paying attention to it and we're focused on it. But I do think that we will all be surprised in a few months how much progress they're marching ahead on some of the climate change stuff. They're marching ahead on financial regulation, and I suspect we'll all look back and be kind of surprised at how much gets done.
Yeah, that's amazing. That stuff is all getting done right now behind the scenes. Mike Shearer of the Washington Post, White House correspondent, thank you very much for being here.
Good to be here.
That does it for this edition of Top Line. Be sure to click us on again tomorrow.
And if you live in one of those 12 lucky states today, go vote. If not, go tweet. It's twitter.com/thenote. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Now we know Rick Klein is a big Drudge Report reader, apparently.
That's right.
Take care.